A little over a week ago, I went to the 2026 National, and this year I was thinking I was going to one card show. But by the time we left, I realized that really wasn't true. I had actually gone to 5 different card shows. They all just happened to be in the same building. Because Wednesday was not like Thursday, and Thursday was not like Friday. Friday was definitely not Saturday, and Sunday, well, Sunday might as well have been a completely different event. The crowds changed, the dealers changed, the pricing changed, and the energy changed. And, probably most importantly, what I wanted out of the show changed from day to day. Some days were about sourcing, and some days were just about observing. Some days were about just enjoying the hobby. And by the end of the week, I came away with a few pretty strong opinions about where the hobby is right now. The hobby is thriving. The National can absolutely be a family event. You need to build time in there to do absolutely nothing productive. And I think live selling is starting to fundamentally change the economics at the very bottom of the hobby. So rather than give you another giant pickup recap, I want to talk about what the National actually felt like this year. Because for me, the 2026 National wasn't one show. It was 5. Welcome to my so-called card life. The podcast where we talk about what actually happens when you try to run a real card business. The decisions, adjustments, and lessons that don't show up in highlight reels. Wednesday is probably the closest thing to a blank canvas. Everybody is fresh. The dealers are fresh, the inventory is fresh, and nobody's tired of looking at each other yet. For me, Wednesday was very much a sourcing day. I came into the 2026 National with a pretty specific plan. I wanted cards that I could actually use for JC3 Cards and Collectibles. And that means I'm usually not chasing giant dollar cards. I'm looking for inventory. Cards with recognizable names, enough demand that I can reasonably expect them to sell, and cards I can buy cheap enough that the math makes sense. And the National gives you access to a level of inventory that you just don't see at most local card shows. But Wednesday is also dangerous because everybody is still optimistic. Nobody's been standing behind their tables for 4 days yet. And nobody's thinking about packing the van. Nobody's worried about how much inventory they're going to have to drag back home. Just dealers thinking, this is day 1. I've got 4 more days to sell this. So the deals are there, but you have to know what you're looking for. You have to dig, compare, and you have to be willing to walk away. You're also trying to learn the room. Who has the type of inventory I want, and who's overpriced? Who has real volume? Who looks like they might be somebody worth circling back to on Sunday? And that was Wednesday for me. Not necessarily the cheapest version of the National, but probably the best day to start gathering information. And at a show that size, information is very valuable. If you enjoy this kind of hobby and reseller conversation, check out The Dollar Box live every other Wednesday night from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Central We go live with JC3 Cards and Collectibles in the Dollar Box to talk cards, reselling, eBay, whatnot, live selling, inventory strategy, and whatever chaos the hobby gives us that week. It is part hobby talk, part reseller discussion, and part live reaction to what is actually happening in the card market. You can catch the Dollar Box live every other Wednesday night from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Central Time. Thursday really stood out to me this year because Thursday was busy. I mean, really busy. And I don't mean Saturday busy, because Saturday is its own animal. But Thursday felt significantly stronger than I expected from past years. There were a lot of people in the building, a lot of people buying, a lot of money moving. And this is where I started thinking about one of the larger takeaways from the week. The hobby is thriving. Now, I want to be careful when I say that. That doesn't mean every product is doing well. And it doesn't mean every dealer is making money. It doesn't mean every segment of the market is going up. And it definitely doesn't mean you can just buy anything and expect it to appreciate. That's not at all what I mean here. What I do mean is that demand to participate in this hobby is enormous. People are showing up. They're traveling, they're buying cards, buying wax, they're paying for autographs and standing in lines. They're playing games at the manufacturer booths and they're watching breaks. Making deals, they're bringing their kids, they're buying memorabilia, and they're walking around for hours. And while they're doing that, they're spending money, and a lot of it. Every year, we hear some version of the same conversation. Is the hobby slowing down? Was the pandemic boom the peak? Are people leaving? Is there too much product? Now, I'm not dismissing any of those concerns because there are some valid points in there. There are absolutely areas of the hobby that are softer than they were a few years ago. But if you walk through the National and your conclusion is that nobody cares about sports cards anymore, I'm not sure what show you were at. There's still an enormous appetite for collecting. And maybe even more importantly, there's an enormous appetite for the experience around collecting. And that part is really important. Because I think the National is becoming less of a giant card show and more of the annual convention for the entire hobby. And Thursday was when I really started feeling that. By Friday, my own approach had changed. I wasn't thinking about every minute in terms of sourcing efficiency anymore. And that was probably a good thing. Because if all you do at the National is dig through boxes, you're missing a huge part of the event. There's so much happening there that has almost nothing to do with buying cards. Displays, memorabilia, manufacturer exhibits, games and promotions, artists and athletes, other content creators, people showing off collections that you may never see anywhere else. And then there are just the conversations. That might have been one of my favorite parts of the week. You're surrounded by tens of thousands of people who all have some version of the same weird obsession you have. You can strike up a conversation with somebody you've never met before because you're both staring at the same card or the same display or digging in the same box. You hear stories, you hear what they collect, You hear how long they've been doing it, and you hear what they came to the National hoping to find. And those moments have absolutely no measurable return on investment, which is exactly why I think you need them. I think one of the mistakes you can make at the National is overscheduling the entire trip. If every hour has a plan, and if every stop has a purpose, and if every purchase has to fit a spreadsheet, you can optimize the fun right out of the experience. There should be some time at the National where you are doing absolutely nothing productive. Look at something just because it's cool. Play a game at a booth just to have some fun. Watch something happen across the aisle. Talk to somebody. Go look at cards you have no intention of buying. Just waste an hour. Seriously, waste an hour. At a normal sourcing show, wasting an hour might be a mistake. But at the National, wasting an hour might be one of the best things you do all week. Friday was also when something else became pretty clear for us. The National can absolutely be a family event. And I wasn't completely sure that would be the case going in, because this was still a sourcing trip for JC3. I had business objectives. I had inventory I wanted to find. I had things I needed to accomplish. And dragging your family around while you dig through cards for hours is probably not anybody's idea of a great vacation. But that isn't really how the week developed. We made it a team effort, and everybody had a role. Everybody had things they wanted to see, and everybody had things they enjoyed independently. Sometimes we were together, sometimes we split up, and then we'd meet back up later. We developed our routines. Lunch became a little tradition. Dinner became part of the trip. Everybody got to experience the show in their own way. And what surprised me the most was that by the end of 5 days, nobody was saying never again. It was pretty much the opposite. We came away wanting to do it every year. And I think that's a bigger deal than it maybe sounds, because the hobby has always struggled a little bit with the perception that it's just people staring at cardboard. But the National has evolved into something much broader than that. There's enough happening that a family can share the experiences without everybody needing to collect the exact same thing. And years from now, those memories are going to matter a lot more to me than whether I bought some card for 50 cents instead of $1. And then comes the spectacle of Saturday. Saturday is the National turned all the way up to 11. The floor is packed, the aisles are packed, people are everywhere. If Thursday showed me that the hobby is healthy, Saturday made it impossible to ignore. Saturday is not really a sourcing show for me, at least not in the traditional sense. Trying to efficiently dig through boxes while thousands of people are flowing around you is not exactly ideal. Saturday is more about observing what the National has become. It's a spectacle and entertainment. It's commerce and collecting culture, social media and live selling and breaking. It's nostalgia. It's kids buying Pokemon, adults chasing cards they wanted when they were 12. It's people walking around with cases full of cards worth more than my truck, and other people buying dollar cards. all at the same event. That's what makes the National so interesting. There really isn't one hobby anymore. It's dozens of little micro hobbies living inside the same building. Vintage collectors, modern collectors, set builders, prospectors and Pokemon collectors, wrestling collectors, Star Wars collectors, some hunting autographs and memorabilia, investors, dealers, breakers, live sellers, and flippers. People who don't care if their collection ever goes up in value. They all coexist. Sometimes awkwardly, but they coexist nonetheless. And Saturday is when you see all of them at once. Saturday also reinforced something I had already started noticing while sourcing. I think live selling is changing the bottom of the hobby. And I don't think we fully know where that ends yet. Here's what I mean by that. For years now, the low end of the hobby had a pretty simple ecosystem. A dealer might buy a giant collection, pull out the obvious stars, pull out a few bigger cards, and then all the leftover recognizable stuff goes into quarter boxes, or maybe a 50-cent box or a dollar box. That was the inventory supply chain. And sellers like me could come along and dig through those boxes, identify cards that fit our market, and create value by doing the work. That work being sorting, listing, imaging, shipping, finding that right buyer, and then live selling exploded. And live sellers demonstrated something important. A card that somebody bought for 25 cents or even less can occasionally sell for $8, maybe $10, or even more. And dealers are watching that happen. And dealers are not stupid. They see somebody digging through their quarter box, and then they see that same card later being auctioned on a live stream. They see people bidding it up, and naturally, they start thinking, wait a second, why am I selling that card for 25 cents? So now, a quarter card becomes a dollar card. The dollar card becomes a $3 card. And the $3 card becomes $5. I saw a lot more of that at the National this year. Cards that I would traditionally expect to find in dollar boxes were being priced at $3, $4, even $5. And that matters because there's an entire resale ecosystem built on that bottom layer. But I also think there's an important misunderstanding happening here. Just because a card sells for $8 on a live stream does not necessarily mean that card is worth $8. The live seller may be selling something besides the card. They're selling entertainment and convenience. They're selling access and community. They're selling the excitement of an auction and competition between bidders. They may have spent years building an audience that trusts them, and that has value. So if a card sells for $8 live and the dealer says, well, then I should be getting $4 for it, those aren't necessarily the same transaction. The person buying the card for a quarter and selling it for $8 may actually be adding $7.75 worth of value through the selling process. It doesn't mean the cardboard itself suddenly became an $8 card. And I think that distinction is going to become increasingly important because if everyone in the supply chain tries to capture the final retail price, eventually there's no margin left for anyone downstream. And when that happens, one of two things has to change. Either retail prices go higher or buyers stop buying. That's something I'm going to be watching very closely over the next year. And then Sunday happens. Sunday might be my favorite version of the National from a sourcing standpoint. Because now everybody is exhausted. Dealers are tired, buyers are tired, the inventory is even tired. And suddenly the psychology changes. Wednesday psychology is, I have 5 days to sell this. But on Sunday, it becomes, I have to pack this thing up in 3 hours. And that's a completely different negotiating environment. Dealers become much more open to bundles, and they become more open to moving inventory. They start looking at boxes they really don't want to bring home, and sometimes the best question you can ask isn't, how much is this card? It's how much for all of it. Because Sunday is where patience can pay off. And it reinforced one of the biggest lessons from the entire week. If you attend the National for multiple days, you shouldn't approach every day the same way. There are things I would buy Wednesday that I wouldn't bother chasing on Saturday. And there are things I would never pay Thursday pricing for if I think I have a realistic chance to revisit them on Sunday. There are things I might buy Sunday simply because the price changed enough to make the math work. Same cards, same building, completely different show. So after 5 days, I came home thinking about 4 things. First, hobby is thriving. Again, not every segment, not every product, not every seller. But participation in this hobby is enormous. The demand for cards, collecting, experiences, entertainment, and community is still very real. Second, the National can absolutely be a family event. It doesn't have to be 5 days of dragging everybody behind you while you stare into boxes. Make everybody part of it. Give people room to enjoy their own version of the show. And it can become something your family looks forward to together. Third, you need to schedule time to waste. There are plenty of card shows where maximizing your time matters. But the National is different. Some of the best parts of the trip might have absolutely nothing to do with buying or selling cards. And fourth, live selling is changing the bottom of the hobby. It's exposing value that dealers didn't always realize existed. But I think the market is still trying to figure out how much of that value belongs to the card and how much belongs to the seller who creates the experience around the card. That distinction matters, and we'll uncover more on that as time goes on. When I walked into the 2026 National on Wednesday, I was thinking mostly about inventory. What can I buy? What can I bring back to JC3? Where are the opportunities? But by Sunday, I was thinking about something much bigger. was thinking about where the hobby is going. I was thinking about how many different versions of this hobby can exist under one roof. I was thinking about how much fun we had as a family. And I was thinking about how quickly I wanted to come back. Wednesday was the opportunity show. Thursday was the serious hobby show. Friday was the convention, while Saturday was the spectacle. And Sunday was the value show. 5 completely different card shows, one national. And if we can make it work, I think this is going to become something our family does every year. And that is the best pickup I made all week. Thanks for joining us again. We'll talk to you again next time. And until then, we hope you too keep building your own so-called card life.